Is your dad a psychopath? Are you in danger? Or is it maybe even something that actually benefits you? We're going to go over the signs, most of them behavioral, but some of them physical. In addition to going over the general traits of a psychopath, we're going to discuss some possible indications specific to fathers, maybe even your own dad. And we'll discuss some things you can do and some things which you absolutely should not do. 1% of females in the world are thought to have psychopathic brains, 3% of males. So there's a 3% chance your father is a psychopath. If you don't like math, let's put it in perspective. If you put 100 dads in a room, 3 of them will be psychopaths. Yikes. But that does not mean they're monsters. However, they have brains which are wired entirely different than normal human beings. It's almost like they're a different species. We're going to meet a lot of them in this series, and you'll see just how utterly different they are. If you don't already have a psychopath in your life, you might even be tempted to go out and find one. But pay close attention, because that might not be such a good idea. Another thing we'll see is how difficult they can be to spot, because they're master imitators, supreme watchers. From before they can even walk, they watch people very closely, very intensely. They know they're not the same as us. They consider us alien, so they watch and they mimic. And one thing they do, which is central to their character, they use this mimicking to manipulate us. You probably already know that psychopaths are incapable of empathy, but it's much more than that. Psychopaths come in 2 distinct types, usually called type 1 and type 2. Consider some of the differences. Type 1 psychopaths are characterized by either a complete lack of emotion or they have cold emotions, emotions that burn, almost invisible to others. Type 2 psychopaths, by contrast, are emotionally unstable. Their emotions run hot, explosive. So it's not just a matter of different degrees of psychopathy. Type 1 and Type 2 psychopaths are different kinds of creatures with many elements in common, but some very distinct traits. Another difference is in criminality. Both types of psychopaths are associated with crime. However, while the Type 2 is associated with frequent crime, crimes of all types, the Type 1 psychopath is only associated with serious crime. But to be clear, Type 1 psychopaths aren't all criminals. In fact, probably most of them are not. People with lower levels of Type 1 psychopathy will usually find their way into positions of leadership and success. CEOs, investors, surgeons, generals, and politicians. But you're here to find out if the guy you grew up with is a psychopath. You want to know if this might benefit you or if you might be dealing with a monster. Before we get to it, here comes the one and only commercial you'll see here, but you can click through it if you prefer. But aren't you curious what YouTube's algorithm has selected for you? Remember, Mother Google is always listening. Before we go down the checklist of traits, it's worth saying that every dad and every person really has times when they have acted psychopathic. So please don't rush to judgment. Okay, let's go down the general checklist for a psychopath before becoming more specific to dads. A psychopath is usually charming when he wants to be. It's superficial, a show he can put on at will. He's very good, impressive really, but those that are close to him can see it's not sincere. The psychopath is also impulsive. This is more obvious with a Type 2 psychopath, where the swings in interest can be wild and frequent. The Type 1 psychopath might have more control over these impulses, so it might not be as visible, but he's still subject to impulses which might not make sense, which might not even be in his best interest, and sometimes he can't resist them. The psychopath is manipulative. In fact, this is one of the classic signs of the psychopath. He'll manipulate you in order to achieve his own goals, but he might also manipulate you just because he can. It's a way of exercising power over you. Think of a child. Young children manipulate people for their own needs, and sometimes they do it just in order to explore the boundaries of what they can get away with. A psychopathic child will do the same thing, but with unusual cruelty. He might draw his mother's affection by seeking a hug, and then bam, headbutt her for no reason.
The terrifying part for me was that I could never tell what he was really doing at any given moment. One of the things he used to love to do was he would love to climb up on my lap, and he would cuddle with me and, kiss me and all of that stuff. And then just out of nowhere, he would just wham, he would just headbutt me. And I never knew what was coming. I never had any idea whatsoever what was going on in any given moment. I had no idea if he was climbing on my lap to actually, hug and kiss mama, or if he was climbing on my lap to headbutt mama.
Well, a normal child will outgrow the desire to always be manipulating. The psychopath will not. He'll simply make his manipulation more subtle. No more headbutts, but he'll find other ways to provoke a reaction, or at the very least to achieve his own ends without any regard at all for your well-being. Next on the list, a psychopath is a pathological liar. If you catch him in a lie, he won't skip a beat. He'll just go right into the next lie. This isn't normal behavior for a father to display in front of his kids, even once they become adults. Now, we're not talking about little white lies or family teasing. We're talking about the kind of odd lying that a normal dad would be ashamed to get caught in around his children. Lying that often has no purpose. The psychopath feels no shame, ever. Though remember, he is a master mimicker. He can feign anything, including shame. Next on the list, the psychopath is grandiose. Grandiosity means he falsely presents himself as a big shot. He has an unrealistic sense of superiority over everyone else. Okay, continuing down the list, he's shallow. Fails to take responsibility for his actions. He's callous, has poor behavioral controls, lacks realistic long-term goals, and he's utterly, ruthlessly lacking in remorse. By lacking, we mean he's incapable of it. He might pretend, remember, they can mimic like an Oscar winner, but he feels no remorse about something he's done, ever. Now, before you yell, "That's my dad," we should note that all dads display some of these things, especially when they're kidding around. So be careful. Odds are your dad is not a true psychopath. And it's almost certain that sometimes everyone's dad seems like a psychopath. Just because he charmed your mom into letting him build a baseball diamond in the cornfield doesn't mean he's a psycho. Well, maybe that's not a good sign. And just because he manipulated you into coming over to help set up his phone, that really isn't a sign either. That probably just means he misses you. And of course, his phone is a mystery to him. Also, sometimes it's dad's job to be charming. So it's not unusual if he just wants to look cool in front of your friends. This is how it is with a lot of things on the official list. Everyone is told a lie, and if you live with someone, you've seen them at their worst. And dad bragging about stuff he obviously never did is not necessarily weird either. What about the part about lacking realistic long-term goals? Again, almost every dad does. Maybe he's got a crazy business idea about a pizza place where you make your own pie. Or maybe he's obsessed with UFOs and thinks he can get an amazing photo. Well, people are quirky, and dads can be extra quirky because it's not easy being a dad. He's had to sacrifice a lot, maybe even his whole lifestyle from before he had a family. So dads are weird. It goes with the job description. When you're trying to spot psychopathic behavior, you have to remember that these things can be subtle, and you have to put together several of these traits in order to conclude something is not normal. It's tricky. So how do we know when there's a problem? The psychopathic brain is actually different. It's not wired like a normal person's. Doctors can actually see this on an MRI. The part of the brain responsible for empathy is not properly developed. It's like looking down on a city where there's a partial blackout. Some neighborhoods are lit up like normal, but others are mostly dark, the only light coming from where people have their own generators. And in the psychopathic brain, that dark neighborhood is where empathy lives. Here's the definition of empathy: the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Sharing is the key concept. A psychopath might still have what's called cognitive empathy, where he understands the feeling on some level, but when he sees someone else's emotional state, he's not able to share the feeling. So he doesn't feel anything himself. He doesn't care. Again, they are masters at mimicking, so he can pretend. But if you study him closely, you can spot that it's not genuine. Be careful in how you think about this. It's normal for a man to not appreciate more complicated things like what a woman might be feeling in certain situations. For example, if you're stressing about what clothes to wear out tonight and dad doesn't seem empathetic, that's not weird. That's male. But he should be able to understand primal things like pain or fear. If you twist your ankle in front of him, he should share that pain on some level. A psychopath does himself experience pain normally. Therefore, he understands it. So if he sees you burning your hand on the stove, he understands what you felt. He just has trouble sharing the feeling, and he has no reaction to it. In a later episode, we'll dig much deeper into empathy, which turns out to be quite complicated, and we'll even propose a new theory, a radical new idea on just what psychopaths feel. We'll explore whether psychopathy is a dysfunction or something that Mother Nature actually wants human populations to have a certain number of.
He said, yeah, you're right, except for the fact that over the entire size of a population, a few psychopaths actually make sense. If you're a raiding party, a Viking raiding party that needs to go over and fuck everybody up in Lindisfarne, which is near to where I lived in the UK, you want some psychopaths. You don't want them to come back with PTSD. You want them to go over there, burn everything down, rape the women, pillage, come back with gold and supplies and grain and whatever else they take, and not care about it. You actually, on an individual level, psychopathy might not be fantastic for the people around them, but in a tribe, it's actually quite adaptive and quite useful. It's like a weapon, like a very specific sort of weapon that you can use.
Yeah.
In a moment, we'll tell you some signs specific to fathers that you can watch for. And we'll even show you some little tests you might try in order to help get an idea if he's a psychopath. But first, we have to discuss the potential danger. We have to talk about monsters. Most psychopaths are not killers. They're certainly not serial killers. However, most serial killers are psychopaths. So if dad is a psychopath, there is a greater risk he's a killer. And the scariest part is he's probably very good at hiding it. Many of the most notorious killers in history raised normal, stable families. The BTK killer, the Green River killer, and Richard Allen, who is now on trial for killing Abby and Libby in Delphi. We have to discuss something called ASPD, antisocial personality disorder. When a psychopath has ASPD, that's when there's a real danger. Antisocial personality disorder is more strongly associated with type 2 psychopaths, but perhaps more scary in type 1. Because those guys have much more control over their behavior. They can be extremely intelligent. They're better at wearing masks. A type 1 psychopath without ASPD is the kind of guy that can be very successful in life. He can be a fun dad, the life of the party, a bold adventurer, and he's probably very successful in his career. He's intellectually interesting, stimulating, probably wealthy. So in many ways, a great dad, other than the fact that he doesn't, actually care about you. Hey, you can't have everything, right? So what is ASPD? Antisocial personality disorder is characterized by a long-term pattern of disregard of or violation of the rights of others. Someone with this condition also has difficulty sustaining long-term relationships. They usually have a long criminal history and are very aggressive. Because of their unique brains, psychopaths are vulnerable to this condition, but not every psychopath has ASPD. Type 2 psychopaths usually do, but type 1 psychopaths can usually avoid it. They might come to accept going through life more or less playing by the rules, staying within the law. A lot depends on their upbringing. Dr. James Fallon, who we'll meet in more detail in a later episode, is a neuroscientist who is studying the brains of criminal psychopaths using MRIs. As a control, he mixed in MRIs from his own family and from colleagues with those of psychopathic killers. To his utter shock, he discovered that he himself had a psychopathic brain. After much introspection, he realized that he actually did have all the traits of a psychopath. He's written a fantastic book called The Psychopath Inside. Fallon has been married to the same woman, his high school sweetheart, for decades. He has children and a mostly normal relationship with them. He's also never been a criminal. However, asking his family members questions about how they saw him helped him realize what maybe on some level he'd long known: he was different. He's callous, has no regard for their feelings, easy to bore, and ever in need of stimulation. He'd engage regularly in behavior that put not only his life but their lives needlessly in jeopardy. He always escalated arguments, refusing to back down. He had to win at family games. At the end of the day, despite being a successful scientist and a stable husband and father, he had to admit that he really didn't care about anyone else. He wants to care. He knows a father and husband is supposed to. And since his discovery about his brain, he goes through the motions of trying to act more caring. He hopes that over time it will develop some rudimentary synaptic pathways that involve caring. But really we're talking about, at best, very tiny increases in his ability to care. His brain just isn't set up that way. And since overall he's actually very happy with himself, he's not much inclined to change anyway. Now, why didn't he become a criminal or a monster?
As it turns out, I have the brain pattern of a psychopath. I've got the genes, like all of them, that would make me a very violent, dangerous person. I'm a neuroscientist, and my research, my interests have been half in adult stem cells throughout my career, and also in psychiatry. And within psychiatry, we're very interested in the genetics of psychiatric disorders. The third key thing is abuse, and how that early childhood abuse, very severe abuse, sexual, emotional, physical abuse, those three things put together seem to be the key elements. And the one thing that isn't there, the one ingredient, is I was never abused, and I had a wonderful childhood that apparently protected me in some way from this kind of funky biology.
He grew up in a loving, nurturing environment. So he had the image of himself as a good Christian person. Indeed, though he is now an atheist, in his teens he was extremely religious. So because of his background, and also probably because of his extremely high IQ, Dr. Fallon avoided antisocial personality disorder. Your dad might be some version of this. Successful, entertaining, in demand by others, but utterly cold in his family relations. On the other hand, if your dad is a type 2 psychopath, you probably already know it. He's involved in a lot of criminal activity, impulsive crimes, senseless crimes. He often gets caught. He has substance abuse problems, such as drugs or alcohol. He engages in a lot of high-risk behavior. He speeds his car and tailgates without a second thought. He has a parasitic lifestyle, meaning he'll borrow money from you or mom and never repay it, and he won't work if he doesn't have to. He has absolutely no long-term goals or ambitions, or if he does, they're completely unrealistic, delusional. But if your father has type 1 psychopathy, it can be more difficult to spot. And if he also has ASPD, you might be in grave danger. So let's get to the list of traits that applies more specifically to dads, and then we'll give you a few simple tests you can safely run on your own to check and see if he's a psychopath. The first one, tit for tat. All humans are hardwired to have a sense of tit for tat. We've evolved that way because we're social animals, meaning we live together in tribes. Our instinct to bond and to cooperate is what gives us the advantage over tigers and crocodiles. Without tit for tat, over a few generations, a tribe would evolve to consist mostly of cheaters, because the cheaters would have a survival advantage over the non-cheaters. But once that happens, now the tribe is in danger of extinction, because cooperation is what gives the tribe as a whole a survival advantage. So to compensate for cheaters, we've evolved a sense of tit for tat. If someone cheats, we make sure to respond in kind. If someone cheats you, he creates a debt, and you won't forget it until it's cleared. The urge for tit for tat varies in people. With some, the tit that comes for the tat involves a punitive element. So if you steal my beer, I'll avenge it by taking 5 of yours. Tit for tat is a normal instinct in humans then. But with psychopaths, it's beyond rigid. It's a debt that must be paid no matter what. And it must be paid in full. There's no escaping it. You can apologize. You can try to do something to make it up to him. But he'll get his revenge. He'll probably get it silently. So you might not even know that it happened, and it might take months or even years, but it's coming, and there's nothing you can do about it. He can't even actually help himself. It's not a hot revenge. He won't celebrate it afterwards. He'll collect the debt with the cold certainty of the IRS. Depending on his makeup, the revenge will either be proportional or punitive. If his tit-for-tat sense is proportional, it will always be that way. The tit will always be equal to the tat. So if you tell a joke at his expense in front of others, might not bother him because he is a psychopath, but at some point, he'll get you back by embarrassing you in front of others. If he has a proportional sense, he'll make sure the embarrassment is exactly similar to what you did to him. But if it's punitive, watch out. And you'll see him do this with everyone he encounters in his life. For every slight at his expense, every cheat, there will be revenge, and there's no way out of it. Another sign your dad is a psychopath is that he doesn't need normal sleep. Ever in need of stimulation? If he's a type 1 psychopath, he works furiously. And if he has nothing to work on, he seeks out some new stimulation. But 4 or 5 hours of sleep is really all he needs. There's a reason for this. When we sleep, our minds are processing the many events of the day. This includes all of the emotional interactions between ourselves and others. But with a psychopath, there are no emotional interactions with others. Another sign is he speaks louder than appropriate. And obviously, we're not talking about someone hard of hearing. But a psychopath is not instinctively aware of how others react to his behavior, so he might be unintentionally louder. Fourth on our list is that he bores easily and is super irritable when bored. At number 5 is the psychopathic stare. Psychopaths usually blink less and lock onto your eyes. One reason is because their lack of empathy means they're slow to recognize someone else's discomfort, but another reason is because they use what's called the stare of dominance. Dominance is, of course, a means to an end. Someone that dominates you can use you for their own purposes, but it seems to be more than that with psychopaths. Dominance itself gives them much more pleasure than it does a normal person. At number 6, the psychopath is not keen on touching. There are other conditions that are characterized by this too, such as autism. So as we keep reminding you, you need several psychopathic traits in order to be an actual psychopath. But psychopaths don't experience any benefit in connecting to other people, so they're not keen on things like holding hands or hugging. 7, they don't experience fear or recognize danger, either for themselves or for you. In fact, they show no fear of dying. They have a hard time conceiving it. So dad might take you into a situation that's dangerous and it won't trouble him at all. 8, the only true recognizable emotion he'll display is annoyance. If he's type 1, he'll show cold anger. If type 2, volatile anger. 9, he oddly removes you and other people from his narratives. Let's say you went camping last year and something really funny happened. When he tells the story about it later, your part in it will be so minimal it's almost like you weren't even there. 10, he has no problem with you lying, as long as you don't lie to him. And this is odd behavior in a parent. 11, he never takes responsibility for his mistakes. Never. 12, he'll always escalate arguments and he'll never back down. 13, he may have an unusual fascination with fire. For some reason, many psychopaths are really distracted by fire. 14, he's threatened to kill someone. Some of you might say, well, yeah, obviously. But maybe when you heard your father say something like this, you scoffed it off as he's just kidding. But if he seems at all serious, yeah, for sure, that's a sign. And we saved the most controversial for last, the alien within. There's no scientific evidence for this, and it's difficult to even describe, which is why we're calling it the alien within. But many psychopaths have odd physical quirks that make it appear like the person inside their own skin isn't used to being there. No, we're not at all suggesting something supernatural, though it can look like that. Think of Jeffrey Dahmer walking without moving his arms. Think of Ted Bundy and the odd way he angled his head while talking to someone. Watch video of submarine killer Peter Madsen. His movements come in strange little bursts. Or you can even watch the movements of successful psychopaths like Dr. James Fallon. There's just something a tiny bit off. Or this fascinating woman here, an attorney who publicly talks about her psychopathy. Her movements are just a little atypical. With the volume off, as you watch, you just can see that something is different there. Both Fallon and she are very likable. They're not at all threatening. It's not necessarily creepy, just off. Okay, now it's time for the simple and safe tests you might attempt.
I hope I'm not being cross-examined here. You feel like that? No, not really.
Test number 1, matching blinking. A psychopath will not blink at a normal rate, usually blinking much less frequently, but he will often match your rate. This is part of mimicking normal behavior, and they teach themselves to do this as children. It's a completely conscious thing on their part. They study your face, taking everything in, and purposely match your rate. He might not do this if he's engaging in the psychopathic stare and trying to dominate you. In fact, some highly intelligent psychopaths have learned that the blinking rates of normal people not only reflects their emotions, but that it can affect one's emotions. So the psychopath has learned that by varying his own blinking rates, he can induce you to vary yours, which can influence your emotions. In other words, it's yet another devious way he can manipulate you. But you can not only observe this, you can induce it. Play with your own blinking rates while talking to someone you suspect is a psychopath and see how they react. If they seem to be consciously changing their own blinking, that's a good sign of psychopathy. But on this one, please be very careful. If you suspect that you're dealing with a psychopath who might be dangerous, don't attempt it. Because if a psychopath senses you are purposely changing your blinking rates, he'll suspect you are trying to manipulate him. And this could absolutely bring out the worst in him. Number 2, a tit-for-tat test. Do something small that requires him to retaliate. Be careful, we're not talking about something that will provoke a violent response. And if you sense any risk of doing that, don't mess around. But if you feel secure, try something small like this. Say you're playing the board game Scrabble, and you cheat. You take an extra letter without him seeing. Now, eventually he'll notice. And when he does, you say, Okay, you got me. My bad. So it's clear to him you cheated on purpose. But here's the key part of the test. You apologize sincerely and you offer to skip a turn. This is your dad, remember? If he accepts your offer to skip a turn, he's a psychopath. Or if he doesn't accept the offer, watch him very closely without him knowing. If he cheats in return, he's engaging in tit for tat. Because if he's a psychopath, he can't help it. He'll get even. If not this game, then the next one. Test number 3. The request that sounds to him like an order. The psychopath absolutely resents being on the wrong side of any power relationship. He doesn't think about it, it's just a reaction. So make a small request, something normal and inconsequential, only don't make it sound like a request. Instead of saying, Dad, can you give me a ride later? Say, Dad, I need a ride later. To the psychopath, that will sound like a command. Watch very closely. His initial reaction will be unpleasant, more than just annoying. An intelligent psychopath might catch himself and say, oh, no problem. But for that initial moment, he'll stare into your soul and weigh whether you're confronting him. And that's not normal. It's psychopathic. Test number 4. Ask him if he's afraid of dying. Because if he's a psychopath, he isn't at all. Now remember, they can mimic any reaction, so if he's onto your game, he might answer with some cliche, but it won't sound right. It might be a little out of place. Because he's really not afraid of his own death, or you dying, or his mom, or anyone. Finally, let's call this last test the Bronx Tale test. In the movie The Bronx Tale, Sonny tells C, the young man about to go on his first date, about a test to see if she's one of the great ones, so someone special. He tells C to open the door for his car door, but leave the driver's side door locked. If she reaches over and unlocks the door for him, she might be someone special. Well, you can come up with your own version of this, because a psychopath never thinks of others, certainly never puts them before himself. A psychopath will fail this test every time. A regular dad, probably the one you've always known and loved, won't. Okay, please check out the next video in the series, Signs Your Mom is a Psychopath. We've got some special signs to look for with moms and some more special tests. And we'll continue to explore generally what it means to be a psychopath in this series, as well as the many varieties of psychopath. We'll ask whether your child is a psychopath. We'll compare movie and TV psychopaths. We'll explore what studying the brains of psychopaths tells us about our own minds. We'll ask whether they have an advantage or a disadvantage in sports. We'll meet some real, high-functioning psychopaths. We'll take a journey into the dark triad, speculate on the rise of artificially intelligent psychopaths, and we'll delve into the evolutionary purpose of psychopaths. Where would we be without them? Now, don't worry, if you don't click subscribe, we won't go psycho on you. But if you think we've earned it, click subscribe, hit the like button, click notify. Boy, we're demanding, aren't we?